Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on advocacy training with Mary Pryor, King's Counsel from the 36 group. For those of you who haven't joined our webinars before, my name is Sammy. I am an assistant consultant at DG Legal. The slides from today's presentation will be sent over tomorrow, and a recording of the webinar will be made available. So if we do run over and you need to leave, then you can watch the rest at another time. We are in webinar mode, so we can't see or hear any of you. So please use the Q&A function so that the speaker can answer your questions. So to introduce Mary, Mary is a criminal casey with special expertise in questioning and representation for the most vulnerable members of society, with particular focus on those on the autism spectrum with ADHD and personality disorders. Mary is often instructed in homicide, serious sex offences, child sexual exploitation, and organised crime groups involving firearms and drugs. Over to you, Mary.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to what I hope will be an instructive and informative way for you to improve your advocacy. There are a couple of people in the chat who are saying they can't hear. I'm sure that our admin will be in touch with you in a moment. Can I make two apologies at the outset? Firstly, I'm in the middle of a murder trial, so I'm appearing from Derby Crown Court. Ordinarily, the tannoy doesn't go off at lunchtime. Today, it's going mad. So please excuse it if you hear a tannoy in the background. And secondly, as you can see, I have proper wig hair today. That's because I've been wearing a wig all morning. I'm not known for my looks in any event, so please just ignore the hair and focus on the content of the presentation. Next slide, please. Could we have the next slide, please? Thank you. When you got up this morning, no doubt you had a wash or a shower. And you will have put clothes on, no doubt clean clothes, and you will have combed your hair, put on clean shoes, put on a coat, got all of your things together and left the house. You'll have then got to your car or other mode of transport. And if it was as cold as it was where I live this morning, you will have had to have scraped the screen of your windscreen to take the ice away, and you will have had to have warmed up the engine of your car. Now, what did you do before you left home this morning to prepare for advocacy? Because we are all, are we not, as lawyers, advocates? Well, let's start with some ordinary preparation, shall we? I am a King's Counsel in criminal law, which means that advocacy is my daily diet. And advocacy for a casey must look effortless. It looks like I'm doing it without a real thought process. And effortless advocacy is, in fact, exactly the opposite. It's full of effort, because the absolute key to success in any advocacy is preparation. Advocacy is 99% preparation and 1% inspiration. It removes many of the errors that occur in any performance if you prepare thoroughly and well. If you don't prepare thoroughly and well, your advocacy will suffer. And so the first thing that I would say to you is that you must always prepare for advocacy, whether that advocacy is a telephone call, a negotiation, a chat with a colleague, a work interview, or advocacy in court. Next slide. Next slide, please. How do you prepare for advocacy? Well, the first thing that you have to do is to read the papers that you have in front of you. The second is that you have to read them with sufficient care to understand the content of them. And the third means of preparing for advocacy is something called fact management. I was rather astounded to discover recently that not all solicitors or barristers are taught fact management. And if you don't know how to do it, then please do email DG Legal and I can send over a fact sheet on how to fact manage a case. But effectively, what it consists of is going through the evidence and preparing a graph or plan which demonstrates what each of the witnesses says about each aspect of the evidence, so that by the time you've done that, you can see where all inconsistencies and discrepancies lie. Once you've got the facts at your fingertips, you must reread the law. Well, you will say to me, I don't have to read the law. I know what the law is. Let me tell you that in each and every case I do, I reread the law. It is important that you do not become complacent with your understanding of law. It is always worth rereading it, the essentials, because they can change, and also because you can start making errors which you repeat again and again if you don't go back to the basics. So reread the law. Once you've read and understood your papers, fact managed them, read the law, then you make notes and you produce postcard size notes for the topics that you need to cover. Consider when you've done that, the opposing position, and prepare for that position too. If you have notes on postcard size pieces of paper, then whatever happens to your computer, or whatever happens to anything else like your memory or your nerves, you will be ready to deal with any topic as it arises. So if a judge says to you, I'd like to talk about this topic, you go to your fourth card and you're ready to deal with it. If you're ready to deal with everything, you are prepared. Next slide, please. So advocacy is far wider and greater than anyone considers it properly to be, because as a lawyer, an advocacy exercise incorporates any telephone call you make on behalf of yourself or your business. It includes conferences with clients, that's advocacy, negotiation, court appearances, and also Zoom and Teams meetings. All of these things are advocacy. All of them, in my opinion, require the same level of preparation. Often we let ourselves down by failing to properly prepare for things other than a court appearance. Each of them uniquely has its value in the criminal system and in the civil system, and it's important that you deal with them thoroughly and well. If you build from the bottom in terms of advocacy, by the time you're in court, you are on fire. Next slide, please. Particularly with remote working, it's very easy to get yourself in a position where it feels either isolating or less important. If you are working remotely, you still need to warm up. You need to warm up your voice, and you need to consider your position when seated. In order to make the best of the advocacy that you have available, you must learn to sit. Now that sounds bizarre, doesn't it? But people don't sit properly. So when you sit, you should have your knees at the same angle as your hips. So your legs should mirror the position of your hips. Your feet should be touching the floor. And in an ideal world, if your feet are not visible, take your shoes off and put the balls of your feet on the floor. That's really helpful to ensure that you keep yourself in the right position. Once you've done that, make sure that your shoulders are back. And really importantly, understand what a screen does for you. If we're in a confined space as human beings, one of the ways that we cope with that biologically is to reduce the amount of breathing we do. We reduce the amount of oxygen that we take in. And that is a sensible survival technique. But our bodies were not designed for the computerized age. And so we need to learn to switch that mechanism off when we're doing advocacy sitting down. And one of the best ways to do that is to remember where you should look when you are doing video recorded advocacy. And that is above the top of your computer. So if you were to consider from where you're sitting to the top of your computer, you need to go higher than that. And your eye should be over the top of your computer, almost like an arc. Why? 3 reasons. Firstly, it ensures that your shoulders, your chest area, and your back are in the right position for you to get as much oxygen into your system as possible. Secondly, it means that your face is in the right location for someone who is trying to listen to you. And thirdly, it means that you are able to breathe properly without your body's natural systems taking over and reducing the amount of breathing that you undertake. That's a technique taught to television and radio presenters if they are also being visually recorded. Remember this too, a grimace or a little sarcastic face or anything else doesn't produce well on video. If you want to smile and to show someone you're smiling, then you need to do it about twice as widely as you already would. Otherwise, it doesn't come over. So a smile like this doesn't look like a smile on a video. If you were face to face with me, you would see I'm smiling. Here, it's not so easy. So on a video, if you wish to show a client or someone else that you're smiling, you have to do this. And that is a much, much wider gesture than you would make in real life. But it is worth remembering, in the same way that someone seeing your face may not be picking up on verbal cues, you may also not be picking up on the right verbal cues when communicating. So it is worth checking with clients and so on how they are feeling and not making assumptions about it because of what you can see on a video. What may be seriousness can in fact be a smile. Next slide. Negotiation and conferences are advocacy, and the same rules apply. The key to successful conference skills and negotiation skills is preparation, notes, and plans, and then in due course, using the advocacy techniques, which I will teach you in a moment, which will assist you to sound like you are the experienced, intelligent, forceful, and formidable advocate that you plainly are. Next slide. Feeling nervous? Well, the best thing to do when you're feeling nervous is firstly to check whether you have imposter syndrome. In other words, is the first thing you're thinking as you're waiting to begin whatever advocacy session you are, oh God, today is the day I'm going to be found out because actually I'm really just a fraud and I'm not very good at my job and it will become obvious to everybody soon? Or is the first thing you think, the judge isn't going to like me, no one's going to like me, I don't really like myself, and I'm trying to do this, and I think it's going to be awful, and therefore I'm nervous. If you're feeling either of those things, welcome to the club. Many, many of us feel those things, but there are simple and clear solutions to those things which you must learn in order to progress in your job. And there is a DG legal webinar available for you on imposter syndrome on the website. So if you have it, watch it and get rid of it because it is toxic. The key always in advocacy is to remember that unlike the Busted song, look at me being down with the kids here, folks, this is not all about you. In fact, you are completely irrelevant. You, as in your personality, you as a human being. This is not about you. This is about your role as an advocate, speaking on behalf of someone, because someone wants you to achieve a particular end, maybe one of many different ends. There may be levels and layers of what they require from you. but you are not speaking on behalf of you. It isn't about you, and it's about them. And it's always really important when you're being an advocate to remember that, because your ego isn't really there. Next. So, what are the tools for advocacy? Well, if you were going to run for the first time, you might put on a pair of trainers and then you would run, right? Not right. You would be taught, wouldn't you, that it's important before you go for a run that what you do is warm up. So you would be told to stretch your leg muscles, your arm muscles, and you would be told to run gently at the start and to warm up. The same applies to advocacy, because the only tools that you have for advocacy are all within the one body that you have. So you need to use your brain, your eyes, your ears, your mouth, and your lungs, because those are the things you need for advocacy, and the external things you need are your notes and papers. And so the first thing that you must do before you even begin any advocacy is to warm up your voice. Do you warm up your voice before you speak? Of course you don't. Why not? Because for reasons I don't understand, don't particularly understand, and never will understand, in fairness, we're not taught advocacy as we should be. Advocacy is a craft, a skill that goes on throughout your career, where you learn throughout your career, but we're not taught how to do it properly. So you have to warm up your voice. How? Well, next slide. Firstly, you have to warm up your body. So before you do any advocacy, raise your arms above your head, like so, to the top, and then put your palms flat so that they are facing that way, and then push both of them to the ceiling as hard as you can. Stretch and do it at least 10 times. And then circle each of your shoulders so that you are taking your shoulder right the way around. Repeat that 10 times and then do the other one. And then do both 10 times. Why? Well, because when we're dealing with paperwork and we're dealing with preparation, we sit like this. And we sit like this all day. And that is really bad for posture. And posture is really important for advocacy. And so what we're doing is we are releasing the tension in those muscles that we have been misusing throughout the course of the morning before we do advocacy. Next. Then we have to warm up our lungs. So you breathe in through the nose to a count within your head of 4, slowly. And then you breathe out through the nose to a count of 4. And then you repeat that 10 times. Then breathe in through your nose and count to 4 aloud. And breathe out through the nose and count to 4 aloud. You really do need to warm up your lungs. And this is how I do it every day before I go into court. Does it work? Yeah, it does work. Why? Because it's important to be energized. It's important to have oxygen flowing, and it's really vital for projection. If you have one of those breathy little voices, then one of the reasons for that is because you're not warming up your equipment. If your voice is shallow, you're not warming up your equipment. Next slide. Breathing warm-ups continue. Yes, then we breathe in through the mouth to 4 in our heads, out through the mouth to 4, in and count to 4 aloud, out and count to 4 aloud, and build up with all of these exercises to 10. Now, folks, you can live your life, if you like, breathing like a hamster. Yeah, shallow breathing. You can live your life like that. It will be shorter than the life that you must live if you want to live to a grand old age, like me, who is now 60. If you want to live a nice, long, happy life and not feel so sad and not feel so tired at the end of a work day, you have to breathe in and out. It is possible to live your life shallow breathing, but it just makes you tired. So if you get to the end of a working day and you are exhausted, it's because to some extent you're not breathing during the day. You're restricting your oxygen levels. And so it's no wonder you're tired. And it's no wonder that it becomes an effort to do all of the things that you need to do as an advocate. Remembering advocacy incorporates telephone calls, conferences with colleagues, right through to court presentation. Next. Then you need to warm up the lovely voice you have. Everyone, by the way, has an inner Barry. Now, this is a sign of my age, I know, but inner Barry is your inner Barry White, all right? So there are lots of muscles in your face you will never have used at all. Why? Because we're not taught advocacy. I think I've mentioned that to you already. So the first vocal warm-up you do is humming. Everyone can hum, yeah? Now, what you then have to do is hum and chew like this. Ridiculous, isn't it? I know. But you see all these muscles here? You use those in advocacy. And they will hurt when you start doing this because you have to chew as if your life depended on it. Serious chewing. And repeat that 5 times, counting up to 10 in your head as you do it. Once you've done that, you've begun the process of warming up your vocal cords. And the next thing you do is say a sentence. Now, if you're someone who has these empowering sentences that you might say to yourself, then by all means use that, such as today is a day for Jason, or today I am super, today I will be brilliant. I'm not very good at that because, very surprisingly for a barrister, I don't really have all that much of an ego. So my warm-up sentence is always, today I plan to achieve this in my case. So today I plan to make sure that the medical evidence that the jury have to listen to is simple. Today I will be making medical evidence simple. You keep repeating it 5 times. And the reason for that is twofold. Firstly, because it reminds you what on earth you were doing today. And secondly, because it's moving the vocal cords in the right direction. You've moved from a hum to a conversation. Next page, please. Now, of course you're nervous. We're all nervous. It is perfectly normal to be nervous, and that's fine. But it's not perfectly normal to have legs shaking along because that's not right. You are better than that. Every advocate is better than that. And breathing exercises will considerably help you to stop the shakiness. Why? Well, firstly, because you will have energized and oxygenized your system. And secondly, because if you do these in the way I've described, you will remember that this is not all about you. Your role here is to speak for someone else. And so that awful exposure that you feel that you may have of yourself is not of you at all. You are telling a story on behalf of someone else. And that's such a good way of grounding yourself and remembering you don't really matter in that sense. You can leave most of your worries and your machinations at home, and you are performing as an advocate for another. Next page. How do you become the best advocate that you can be? Firstly, do not copy anyone else. You are brilliant. You are a brilliant advocate. You are you. Don't try to be someone else, because that space is taken. And if you try to be another person, you will look like a robot. And so when I sit as a judge, I have people in front of me going, "May it please your honour, I am here to represent." Why are you doing it? Be yourself. Just speak to me as if you were speaking to me. If we were having a cup of coffee, the only difference is that you need to make sure you're energized when you're doing it. Here is my biggest tip. If you take nothing else away from this, take this away, please. Shut up. Silence is golden. What do you do when you're nervous is that you fill the space with words. Filler words like. So like, what I was like doing was like, I was doing this like, or or right, so blah de blah. Don't bark at me. I do not want you to bark at me with your rights. And no one begins a sentence with the word so. Don't speak using words that you don't need. Don't say them. And is another one. And when I have a pupil, what I say to them is that they're going to pay me 10p for each time they use a word like, right, so, and. And at the end of their 6 months, they get quite a stash back, actually, because we all fill space. Don't. Silence is golden. And in particular, silence is thinking time. Or as my old mum used to say, God gave you 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 gob for a reason. And she was right about that. Speak less, see and hear more. Next page. Focus on what matters. I do not want to see your shaking Stephen's hands, or this, or this, or this. Okay, you are not selling me a brand of makeup. Keep your hands to your own self. Don't do this, and don't do this. And most certainly don't do that. Okay? If I wanted to go and see the opera, I'd pay good money for it. Keep still. Your power is in your voice. Your voice has a power from your breathing. The content of your speech has a power from your vocal exercises. And it is all made brilliant by that brilliant brain you've got that gave you a degree and a postgraduate qualification. You are a solicitor or barrister of the Supreme Court of England and Wales. Own it. Sit there, take a deep breath, keep still, and talk to me. Because if you do, all of the power remains with you. Do not give your power away by demonstrating all of the reasons why you can't sit still. Your nerves, put them to one side. If you can't keep your hands still, sit on them. It's a very good thing to do. Or hold them together, either in front of you or behind you. Just don't move unless you absolutely have to. Next. How are we going to be the very best advocate we can be? Well, I've been an advocate now for 32 years, and I just about think now that I'm not too bad at it. And I mean that. I am very, very conscious of the fact that it is always an ongoing learning curve. Take that on board, because many, many young advocates seek perfection. They expect to be perfect. I'm not perfect, and I'm a tier 1 leading silk in the legal 500. And even now I go home and I analyze what I've done and I think about how I could do it better. And you know what? That's exactly what you need to do, because advocacy is a craft. It's something that develops as you go, as you learn. So how is it easy for you to improve your advocacy? Firstly, breathe in and maintain your voice. Breathing is the bedrock, the foundation of removing a trembling voice. So I'm now going to do some hamster breathing and show you why it doesn't work. You see, what happens is if you breathe like a hamster, you get this little breathy voice that comes through, and you have to keep breathing really heavily at the end of every sentence, because otherwise you don't get enough breath in, and then your head starts. You get me? Yeah, don't do it. It's exhausting for you and for everyone else. Secondly, absolutely key, slow down. Sometimes when you're nervous, you start speaking at a speed beyond the speed of sound. Don't do it. Firstly, because your brain can't possibly keep up with the words that you're producing, and then you'll start doing it like in business. But also because my brain can't process you speaking at that speed any more than yours can. And so what will I do? I'll switch off, and I'll just wait till you've finished and ask you a question which you will have forgotten the answer to because you're halfway down the road by now. Slow everything down. People may tell you, and if they do, tell me this and I will go over and smack them. People may tell you that you can't have an accent. Rubbish. There is absolutely nothing wrong with an accent. They are beautiful. They are part of you. Own them and take them on board. But there is a difference between having an accent and not pronouncing your words, which is what you must do. So you must focus on your diction. And that means exaggerating how you begin and end words, and also opening your mouth to use the vowel. So, for example, if I was going to say good morning, if I'm doing that not as an advocate, I'd say good morning. Nothing moving here, nothing at all. As an advocate, what I've learned is that all of this air and all of the vocal cords in here need to come out, which means I have to open my mouth wide. So I will say to you, good morning, good morning. And I will exaggerate that and it will sound perfectly normal. And so if you are in a situation where you are dealing with something that is important, speak slowly and pronounce your words. And if you're not very good at certain letters, practice. You can look online and there are lots of exercises. If you say th instead of the, learn to say the, which is by putting your tongue on your top teeth, the, and pushing it down. You'll find exercises for all of these things. You can use your mouth to make the shape of vowels, A, E, I, O, U, not A, I, A. Because once you start talking into the back of your throat, all of that work you've done here goes. Speak clearly, speak slowly, finish your words in an exaggerated way, and it will sound perfectly fine for the audience you're facing. And the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. And so if you're not used to opening your mouth, walk around the house when you're at home and speak twice as openly as you ordinarily would all the time, and it will become normal. And in particular, speak on top of the breath. So take a breath in and think of your voice a bit like a piece of sushi. So rice underneath and salmon on top. Your rice is your breathing, your breath, the foundation and focus of your advocacy. You're talking where the salmon is, so speak on top of the breath. If there's no breath there, don't speak. Nothing will get any better, and you will stand like that. Now, next slide. How do you improve your advocacy further? Read, people, read. No one reads anymore. Everyone scrolls. Read a book, read fiction, read Dickens, read Shakespeare. You don't have to read all of it, but just read enough to improve your vocabulary, because it's the tool you use in your life. If you love reading, You are already on your way to becoming an incredibly good advocate. Here's the next step though, Angel. You have to read aloud. So read your book to yourself, but then read a page aloud. Hear the words in your job. Yes, I know it's part of the job, Alice, reading, but not reading for pleasure. This is not about reading in the sense of reading your papers. This is about taking yourself out of the comfort zone to learn further language. This is about expanding the vocabulary that you have so that when people use words, you don't have to spend your time saying, what does that mean? And that is particularly important if you've had a state education as I had, because one of the many unknown unknowns for those who didn't is that they simply don't understand that you may not know certain words. If you don't know a word, by the way, just say, what does that mean? There's nothing wrong with that. Don't limit it. And so do improve and increase your vocabulary. And when you read aloud, record yourself, listen to yourself, and then use your vocal exercises and record yourself a week later and compare the two. You will improve each week. Now, you'll remember I mentioned your inner Barry. Yes, you must find your inner Barry because your inner Barry is your real voice. What? Oh yeah, your inner Barry is the deeper voice inside your soul, which you never let the world see. And the reason that you never see this wonderful Barry is because you don't breathe deeply enough. And therefore you're breathing up here through your chest. So you've got hardly any oxygen there. And the voice you produce is higher and higher. And therefore what you're doing in those circumstances is what? Breathing like a hamster. And so your voice is higher. How do you find your inner Barry if you're not used to it? Well, sing. If you sing, or if you go to the football or rugby and you sing there, that open chest voice that you have where you are singing as loud as you can, that process gives you your inner Barry. So that's how you speak. That's how advocates speak. That one where you're singing about the parentage of the referee, or you are singing at a concert with one of those songs you really love and your chest is open and your neck is open like that and you are singing, that's your voice. That's your inner Barry. And how does that help you? That helps you because you can then project your voice. Next slide, please. Where does advocacy fail? Well, mainly the reason advocacy fails is because people, when they are doing advocacy, don't ask questions. They do what the Birmingham version of a question is, which is to make a statement and raise the pitch at the end of the statement. So what they will say is, such and such, such and such, such and that. Okay. That's a statement with a Birmingham tilt at the end of it. Don't do that. Ask a question. Why don't people ask questions? Frankly, lack of preparation. Get your questions ready. What do you want to know? Who, what, when, where, why, and how are questions. Now, when you've asked a question, what else do you have? Not listening to the answer. So if you ask a question, do take the trouble to use the 2 ears that you have and the 2 eyes that you have to hear the answer and to see the manner in which it's being answered. Don't focus on yourself. Focus on asking the question and listening to the answer. So often as a tribunal, you will see people miss answers, miss points. And why? They're missing it because they are thinking about themselves and the next question that they've got to ask. you'll remember I said to you, this isn't about you. So don't become emotive in any tribunal. Don't get carried away as if you're in the theatre. Why? Because you'll forget the issues in the case. And you will also really take the risk that many, many tribunals have, that they just will stop liking you. Okay, you might think you're doing an amazing job. And so often young people will say to me, oh, I made all the difference. I was in court and I did this amazing speech and I changed everything. And then you have to tell them that statistically, speeches make a difference in 3 to 4% of cases. And why? Because they get carried away in the theatre, become emotive, don't focus. We are forensic machines. We know, because we're lawyers, all the things we need to ask. So focus on the question and focus on the answer. And then if you get an answer that you really like, don't stamp it to death by killing it, asking too many questions. You've got your answer. Just leave your answer alone. Leave it be. You've got what you need. If you ask 2 or 3 more, you may go off somewhere else. It's almost like, just in the back of your mind, play the tune Frozen. Let it go. Let it go. Next page. More failures. Well, fail to consider the question that you are being asked. As a judge, one of the things we find quite often is I will ask a question and the advocate will be looking at me, and it appears to me that they're listening to me. And I sit both in family and in crime. So this is not a criminal advocate's problem. It's a universal problem. So I ask the question, they look at me, we get to the end, and then it's perfectly clear to me that they have either not listened to the question I've asked, or they've listened to it, but their nerves, their worries have just gone, well, I need to think about something else. They've blanked out where we are. Listen to the question, consider it, and answer it. Don't underestimate the importance of considering the audience you're in front of. Remember what you're trying to achieve and who is important here. Having an ego is not helpful as an advocate. Stick it in the box when you leave home, together with whatever else you need to stick in the box. This is a craft. It is a tool that we are using for someone else. Stick all that thought process that you're amazing or rubbish out of the way. Learn, listen, develop. Next page. So advocacy throughout your life is a constant learning process, a constant craft. You will constantly improve if you work at it, but it is absolutely the very best thing to do, to enjoy and relish. And it's one of the very few things that as you get older in life, you can really, really enjoy. Developing yourself, developing your skill, helping the next generation along, because advocacy is one of those places where practice doesn't make perfect, but it does make things better. Next slide. So that is what I wanted to say to you about advocacy. Now, as we've been talking, I've noticed there's been a huge amount going on in the webinar chat. So I'm just going to have a look if there's anything within it that you need me to answer. Let's have a look. Well, good afternoon to everybody who said good afternoon. It's really helpful for us to know that you're all there. I'm sorry that some of you have had issues with the audio. I understand that you can record it. Kate, how lovely for you to be on this webinar. If you don't know Kate Neild, in my opinion, she's one of the best solicitors I've ever worked with. Compassionate, caring, professional, and a rather wonderful advocate. And she has put in here that we're going to start a short warm-up every morning in the office. Great news. Do that. for everyone. If you work in a group, do start a short warm-up, or do one with your opponent. It's a way of getting to know each other. And I'm very, very grateful to you all for being so kind in these comments. It's really difficult just talking to a screen, isn't it? That's one of the things for you to remember, is when you're talking to a screen, there are real people there listening. And it's really helpful for me to know that actually it's not doing too bad. So I'm really grateful to all of you. And one here saying the main thing is to be yourself. And Mary, you are very, very yourself. Thank you. And you're right. It is absolutely the main thing to be yourself. And Amelia, you use this in whatever way you can. But when you say you're not an advocate, you are. Everyone is an advocate. If you have a telephone conversation, if you have a meeting, if you have an interview, those are all advocacy. Now, for Hana, you say, how can I have the attention without being boring? I cannot imagine for a moment that you're boring, but it does sound like you've got a little bit of imposter syndrome. Start with the process that you are not boring. How could you be? You're a human being, and I have never met a boring human being. All ordinary people I've met are actually extraordinary. Just remember always to make sure that what you do is prepare thoroughly. And if you're making the points you need to make and no more, and you're doing it well, it's not boring. It never will be boring. It will always be interesting. There's the tannoy going. Now, Sushil, you're right. No one reads a newspaper. Reading a newspaper is actually a very good idea because firstly, it keeps you up to speed with things. And secondly, because it has words that you may not otherwise use. And always, if you can, just go onto any internet site and look for something different, something outside your comfort zone, and read about that, because that's really important. If you are struggling with any letter, I see there's one from someone who says they're struggling with the letter R. There are exercises online, if you look for them, which will teach you how to develop your R. And you will see very easily how to do that. But the fact that you see it means that you're working on your voice, and that's great. So do it, and just when you're at home, say lots of words that start with R. Do one of the tongue twisters, which you'll find, which develop that. How would you tweak your skills? You will tweak your skills by recording yourself at different times and then go back. Listen to the improvement, physically record, so visually record yourself as well, and you may see why you're having a difficulty. But the fact that you're thinking about it means that you're doing everything the right way. In case you're asked a question and you need a moment to think about it, what is the best way to buy that time, especially for someone that's not so great on the spot? Well, Anjali, no one is great on the spot. We just blag it in different ways. The first thing to do is to take the time you need. Now, you will think you're taking hours, whereas in fact you're taking nanoseconds. But if you need some time, simply stop and say, may I just have a moment, please, to consider that point? The judge will be delighted if you take a moment, because it's far better than just filling the air with time and sounds and ohs. So just take the time you need. It won't be anything like as long as you think it is. Now, Fabian makes a great point, which is, of course, all of the circuits, barrister circuits, do advocacy training. I don't think that's the same for solicitors, but you all have law societies. And if you ask very nicely from your law society, someone like me would be very happy to come along and help you all with a face-to-face advocacy session. I usually charge a large brandy. or alternatively, just a cup of tea, whichever. But there are lots and lots of advocates who'd be more than willing to come along. And there are some brilliant solicitor advocates as well, who would be able to help you with all of this. So thank you all so much for your kind comments. I hope that this has helped. Just two more questions, I think.
Hi, Mary. We've got a couple of questions in the Q&A, if you'd like me to read them out.
Yes.
So the first one we've got from Danielle. We've got any tips on how to deal with judges that don't seem to be in the best of moods?
Great question, Danielle. Yes. For the most part, ignore what appears to be the bad mood, because the bad mood, for the most part, is probably not a bad mood, but a process of trying to think about 6 or 7 things. And the very best way to deal with someone who appears to be in a bad mood is to be well prepared, take the time you do, and simply follow the advocacy techniques. If someone is rude to you, then simply say something like, may I ask if there is something that I have done which has upset you in some way? Because the answer will be no, and it will simply take the power back to you. But for the most part, judges get grumpy because people come before them, they're not prepared, they haven't done the things that I've suggested to you. And that happens again and again and again. So if you are one of the people who's prepared it well, the judge will be so happy that they will actually just be glad that you are there doing what they wish everyone else would do. There's nothing worse than just having to listen for God knows how long to nothing at all, because people aren't really saying anything. So just be you and ignore what it appears. Remember as well, you can be completely misreading someone's mood, but don't let anyone be rude to you as a judge. It's not acceptable. And what was the other one?
So we've got, what is the best way to deal with advocates who are deliberately harassing or bullying you? I believe that comes off what you've just said. If you'd like to add anything.
If it's an advocate, then feel sorry for them, first of all, because they have clearly got emotional immaturity. That's a very difficult thing to get over. And then understand that you have a power that you didn't realize that you had, because an advocate who is emotionally immature is not a good advocate. If someone is bullying, I find the best way to be is as I'm talking to you now. Thank you very much for your comments. I'll see you in the courtroom. Or that's very interesting. That's not my case. Be neutral, be very polite. If someone feels it's necessary to keep on bullying or being unpleasant to you, simply say to them, my parents are permitted to shout at me. You are not. Please stop it. Or please stop talking to me in that manner. This week, I had to say to someone, when I was a toddler, I had to learn a technique called one at a time. So I'm going to finish my sentence. And when I'm finished, I'm going to listen very carefully to what you've got to say. And I'd like you to show me the same respect. Is that okay? And they did. So when I was younger, I used to get much more what you might call Stoke-on-Trent about it, having grown up in a council estate. So I would be much more bullish about it. But what I've learned is that there is nothing quite as devastating as quiet politeness. So simply be very polite and very quiet. And if it continues, just say, I'm going to leave the room now. I'll come back in a little while when you've calmed down. Keep the power. Don't let anyone talk to you in any way which is disrespectful. There is no need for it, and it's about them, not you. When you are charming, polite, professional, and they've stopped having their little mood, they'll feel like an idiot, and you can go home smiling. Hope that
yeah, that was brilliant, actually. We've got another one which I think is quite good. Do you recommend any books on advocacy?
No, I don't recommend any books on advocacy. It's a bit like reading the highway code over and over again and having never seen a car. If you're nervous about advocacy, go mooting, do debating, practice, 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 go on courses. Reading, no, not really. Find a mentor. That's the key to moving forward. Find a mentor within your profession who will help you, expose you to new opportunities, deal with all of that. It's a very quick question at the bottom. How do you deal with litigants in person? Politely, professionally, and in the same respectful way that you would expect them to treat you. If you treat everyone with respect, then they will treat you with respect. It may take a moment or two, but they will get there. Don't go down to other people's level. And we deal with litigants in person all the time. I find if you are extremely polite and respectful to people, it's a real shock for them, and they're so much nicer. And everyone can leave court in a positive way. So I think we've run out of time.
Yeah, I was going to say, would you like to continue, or would you like to answer these by email or something like that?
I think it'll have to be by email, because I'm prosecuting a double murder at the moment in court. I don't think the judge will be too happy if I'm late back, but
well, yeah, sorry, we understand.
Yeah. Any more questions, happily send them into DG Legal, and I will, of course, answer them. And good luck with your practice as an advocate. Remember, no one better than you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. So as a reminder, the slides and a recording of the webinar will be sent over tomorrow. We'll also send the link for the other webinar that Mary was talking about. So you will be sent an email asking to rate us out 5 stars. So if you enjoyed today, can you please leave us some feedback, and any suggestions of future topics would be greatly appreciated. So our series of webinars continues on the 17th of January. We will be presenting a webinar on the SRA guidance on immigration work and supervision with Amy Higgins from DG Legal. So thank you very much and have a good afternoon.